On this Saturday night, a doctor charged with first-degree murder. The investigation into suspicious deaths at an Ontario hospital.
We are looking at multiple recent deaths at the facility.
What put police on the trail of Dr. Brian Nadler? The end of Operation Honor.
We need a fair process that everyone can believe in.
Why women in the military say the system failed them. Plus, China fires back with sanctions against a Canadian MP. And will the courts have a say in Newfoundland and Labrador's election results?
Global National with Robin Gill.
Good evening and thank you for joining us. An Ontario doctor has been charged with first-degree murder. Dr. Brian Nadler, who specializes in internal medicine, was working at a hospital in Hawkesbury, a town located between Ottawa and Montreal. Police say the investigation is far from over. They're looking into what they describe as multiple suspicious deaths, and the scope of their probe may extend across the country and into the United States. Travis Dhanraj has our top story tonight.
I was kind of shocked when I heard the news.
For 8 days last month, Sebastien Fournier was a patient at this Hawkesbury hospital. He is still coming to terms with the fact his lung therapist, someone he describes as professional and funny, is now charged with first-degree murder.
The doctor I saw was very passionate about his work and very attentive to his patient care.
Dr. Brian Nadler was arrested Thursday night after officers were called to the hospital to investigate a suspicious death. Ontario Provincial Police say they are now looking into multiple suspicious deaths.
That's when the scope expanded, and now we are looking at multiple recent deaths at the facility. So this is still a very new investigation.
Nadler received his degree from McGill University in Montreal in 2010. He went on to do a residency at the University of Alberta in Edmonton until 2014, then headed to Saskatchewan. Documents from that province's College of Physicians and Surgeons show he was charged with 2 counts of unprofessional conduct. A report shows Nadler used misogynistic profanity to describe an attending physician at a Saskatoon hospital and said he felt like slapping her. He resigned from the residency program in 2018, ended up in Reno, Nevada, where he was employed as a geriatric fellow at the university there. He returned to Canada and was licensed last year in Ontario. It's unclear when he started working at the hospital in Hawkesbury.
Well, first off, we can't speculate where this is going to go. Right now, we have one person accused of one charge of first-degree murder.
Global News reached out to police in Nevada and Saskatchewan to see if they had been contacted by Ontario Provincial Police. We did not hear back before deadline. Nadler's lawyer would only say this.
Dr. Nadler maintains his innocence. We will be defending him rigorously.
Fournier says news of the murder charge has spread quickly in the small community, but maintains the doctor gave him excellent care.
No, I didn't see anything wrong with his attitude or his personality.
35-year-old Nadler is also licensed to practice in Quebec, but never has. His next court appearance is scheduled for April 6th. Travis Dhanraj, Global News, Toronto.
We have exclusive details on the crisis that has engulfed the Canadian Armed Forces and its leadership. The military has been grappling with accusations of sexual misconduct among its most senior ranks. Now, the woman making allegations against Canada's Chief of the Defence Staff, Admiral Art McDonald, is breaking her silence. Here's our Ottawa Bureau Chief, Mercedes Stephenson.
I admire and respect her so much.
She was the face of International Women's Day for the Canadian Armed Forces. Navy Lieutenant Heather McDonald, a 16-year veteran of the military, a naval combat systems engineer, ensuring Canada's warships are ready for battle on the high seas. But McDonald's time on one of those ships has landed her at the center of the storm, swirling around the Canadian forces.
It's been very isolating. Very, very isolating for me.
McDonald says she was duty-bound to report a historical incident she allegedly experienced involving Defense Chief Admiral Art McDonald. The incident allegedly occurred on a ship docked off the coast of Greenland in 2010. McDonald stepped aside from his role last month, just weeks into the job, after details leaked revealing a military police investigation. That investigation is still ongoing. Multiple sources have told Global News it relates to an alleged sexual assault. McDonald remembers how difficult it was for her as a naval officer to report the Admiral, the first to lead Canada's military in nearly 30 years.
A sinking sensation in my stomach. It wasn't the best day. It wasn't the best day.
As a woman in the male-dominated trade, McDonald says she's had to deal with inappropriate behavior throughout her naval career. But she says it was the notorious Red Room incident, a Zoom call she attended involving allegedly sexualized comments made by senior naval officers, that triggered her to report the alleged incident involving Admiral McDonald.
But the message that came across loud and clear was Operation Honor applies to you guys, doesn't apply to us. And it really bothered me that that could be interpreted that way and that that message was coming across that way.
Earlier this week, the acting chief of the Defense Staff, Lieutenant General Wayne Eyre, pulled the plug on Operation Honor, the military's mission to stamp out sexual misconduct from its ranks. Eyre said the military will take stock of Operation Honor's lessons and develop a plan to go forward. McDonald says she hopes her story will help bring justice to other members who have been harmed by their own, and that a fair process for trying high-ranking officers, like the CDS, will be developed for other victims.
We have to stop hurting our people. We don't have so many people that we can continue to do so. And we need a fair process that everyone can believe in.
Global News has reached out to Admiral McDonald for comment, but he did not respond. Robin?
Mercedes Stephenson in Ottawa. And you can see the full interview with Lieutenant Heather McDonald tomorrow on the West Block, right here on Global. Beijing is firing back, slapping its own sanctions on Canadian politicians. It's in retaliation for Ottawa imposing penalties on Chinese officials. Foreign Affairs Minister Marc Garneau called the move unacceptable and an attack on transparency and freedom of expression. The sanctions targeted the House of Commons Subcommittee on International Human Rights and singled out conservative foreign affairs critic Michael Chong. In a tweet, Chong said, "We've got a duty to call out China for its crackdown in Hong Kong and its genocide of Uyghurs," adding, "If that means China sanctions me, I'll wear it as a badge of honor." The sanctions prohibit Chong and the other members from entering China, including Hong Kong and Macau, and from doing business with Chinese individuals or entities. This week, Canada joined the U.S., UK, and European Union in imposing sanctions on 4 Chinese officials suspected of being responsible for the persecution of Uyghurs and other Muslim minorities. More than 10 weeks after the vote was called, the results are in for the election in Newfoundland and Labrador. And the Premier's gamble paid off. Andrew Furey has managed to secure a majority, while his 2 key opponents lost their seats. It was a unique election, and the way it was conducted has never been seen in this country. As Ross Lord reports, all that maneuvering could end in a court challenge.
Andrew Furey gambled and won. Preliminary results show Furey's Liberal Party of Newfoundland and Labrador winning 22 of 40 seats in the province, boosting the Liberals from a minority government into a majority.
It's an honor and privilege to stand before you as our province's 14th Premier. To continue as Premier is to stand as a fighter in a proud legacy of fighters for Newfoundland and Labrador.
Both of Furey's rivals lost their seats. PC leader Ches Crosbie and NDP leader Alison Coffin both sidelined. Since the pandemic started, Furey is the 4th incumbent premier to call an election and increase his party's number of seats. It wasn't easy. After a COVID-19 outbreak in the final week of the campaign, staff at polling stations refused to work. Elections planners switched to mail-in voting, but a string of problems followed. Elections NL admitted to allowing some people to vote by telephone, which violated the Elections Act. Some voters said they received too many voting kits. Others got no ballot, leading to extremely low turnout in some parts of Labrador.
I never had any way to put my 2 cents worth in. I never had a chance to vote. And then there's a lot of them not translated for the older folks. So I don't know what the percentage up here of the voters are going to be, but I'd say it's going to be really, really low.
To some, stormy weather on this makeshift election day is appropriate because the results are unstable.
Now it's possible he's stuck with some uncertainty with this election. Even if they have the most seats, it doesn't necessarily mean that they will govern as a majority for a long period with these results.
Especially if the election is challenged in court. But Furey insists he's not worried.
So you consider it a fair election and no question at all about the validity and the mandate that you have?
No.
The controversy threatens to overshadow a bleak reality. Newfoundland and Labrador is broke. A longtime orthopedic surgeon, Furey hints fixing the province's tattered finances will take tough medicine and bold thinking. With lingering questions about how he won, it's unclear whether people are ready to move forward. Ross Lord, Global News, Halifax.
Next week, Canada is projected to hit 1 million cases of COVID-19, and signs of a third wave are already apparent. Today, Ontario reported more than 2,400 cases. It's now been 3 days of more than 2,000 cases in that province, and it's the worst single-day increase since January 22nd. Quebec reported more than 1,000 cases in 24 hours. BC is also seeing a spring surge, with 908 new cases reported Friday. It's the third highest daily total in that province since the start of the pandemic. In the U.S., the vaccination campaign is going at breakneck speed. About 3 million doses are administered each day, but cases are rising in half the states. As Jennifer Johnson reports, scientists are trying to determine whether people who have been vaccinated can still get the virus and spread it.
The head of the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention is urging Americans to take precautions as new cases and hospitalizations of COVID-19 have risen over the last week.
I remain deeply concerned about this trajectory. We have seen cases and hospital admissions move from historic declines to stagnations to increases.
But most states are quickly reopening. There are nearly no restrictions anymore in Colorado. Arizona has lifted its mask mandate. And starting this weekend, bars and restaurants in North Carolina can once again serve alcohol until 2 a.m., but tables have to be 6 feet apart.
Actually have increased staff and increased security and doormen to make sure that there's a presence walking around to let people know we are just as excited as you are, but we still are not quite there yet. We still have rules that we're trying to follow.
Restrictions have eased in Maryland, too, even though cases are rising.
I know the president said he'd like to see some return to some sort of normalcy by the 4th of July, but I'd like to see it done by Memorial Day.
Millions of Americans are being vaccinated each day.
I want to get back to see my family. I love traveling.
But right now, only about 15% of the country is fully vaccinated.
It's clear there is a case for optimism, but there is not a case for relaxation.
A new study is being launched in the U.S. to find out just how effective vaccinations are in stopping the transmission of COVID-19. Researchers will monitor vaccinated college students and their close contacts at select universities.
We'll be able to answer the very important question about whether vaccinated people get infected asymptomatically, and if they do they transmit the infection to others?
That study could be another key to determining when American life can finally get back to normal. Jennifer Johnson, Global News, Washington.
A negative COVID-19 test was the ticket to a concert in Spain. That's right, a concert. 5,000 people packed a Barcelona stadium to see the Spanish band Love of Lesbian. In order to get in, ticket buyers had to take a rapid antigen test. It's part of a study to see if same-day COVID screenings are effective in preventing outbreaks at large events. Face masks were also mandatory, but there was no social distancing. People with heart disease, cancer, and those who recently had contact with an infected person were asked not to sign up. Anti-racism rallies were held today in Alberta and Manitoba after recent attacks against racialized communities in Canada. The protests were peaceful and called for an end to the violence against minorities. Black Muslim women in Alberta have complained about a recent spike in attacks, and Asian communities say they've also been targeted since the start of the pandemic. Still ahead, the deadliest day in Myanmar since the military coup. And the protest in the UK over a new policing law. This is the deadliest day in Myanmar since the military took over. Soldiers shot and killed at least 114 people. Many of them were unarmed civilians and children. But protesters refused to give up. They returned to the streets in more than a dozen cities, demanding the return of their democratically elected leader, Aung San Suu Kyi. In the capital, the armed forces held its annual holiday with a parade. Representatives from 8 countries attended, including Russia and China. The British government is trying to push ahead with a contentious bill that would give police new powers to stop protests. 10 people were arrested in the 3rd night of demonstrations outside the police station in Bristol. It began as a peaceful sit-down protest, but scuffles broke out when officers tried to break up the crowd. Critics of the proposed legislation argue it infringes on the right to free and peaceful expression. That has led to a protest movement known as Kill the Bill. Now to the saga in the Suez Canal. The Ever Given ship is still stuck and still blocking a vital shipping route. Strong tides and winds continue to complicate efforts to dislodge the ship from thick sediment. The head of the Canal Authority says it's looking to remove some of over 18,000 containers on board to lighten its load, but only as a last resort. The ship that carries cargo between Asia and Europe has been stuck in the canal for 5 days now. Still ahead, how young people are giving the power of poetry a modern makeover.
You're watching Global National.
Right now, this is the hottest tourist attraction in Iceland. Hiking trails have been created for the thousands of sightseers wanting to get a glimpse of the fiery lava fountains. The volcano erupted a week ago for the first time in 800 years, and experts say it could be like this for years. Poetry has exploded in popularity. Long viewed as stuffy and elitist, the genre has inspired a new era of young poets from diverse backgrounds, and they don't shy from their personal feelings. I spoke with some young poets across the country about how the medium is getting a new makeover.
I was an ocean once. Bare shoulders and whale song in my rib cage I watched as the rigs drilled holes in my body.
Nisha Patel gets paid to write poems.
They left no part of my trenches unmanned.
Rarely is this a career, but Patel is Edmonton's Poet Laureate.
Your job as a Poet Laureate is to reflect the times and the thoughts and the feelings of the people.
Does the city put any pressure on you to write about them or put them in a good light?
The city has never once put pressure on me to write about them in a positive way. And I'm happy to say that to this day, I probably haven't done that anyway.
Here's the proof in this recent attack on City Hall.
The city wishes harder, shoves body into a convention center, and hopes the people with the votes are appeased, that no tax dollars have been wasted.
There's a new generation of young, diverse poets in Canada with a lot to say.
When I didn't have a Bible, my religion teacher called me Devil's Daughter. I think there's just a hunger for poetry because everybody, if you think about it, like way back in the day, poets were actually revered, they were respected.
Their poems are political, personal, and go beyond the pages of a book. Check out the full story tonight on The New Reality at 7 p.m. Feeding the front lines. Up next, a Canadian entrepreneur thanks the pandemic's unsung heroes. An Ontario entrepreneur has found a way to thank the healthcare workers at long-term care homes. Since January, he's made sure hot meals get delivered to the front lines every single day. And as Karen Lieberman reports, this isn't the first time he's been compelled to help.
In the kitchen of this Middle Eastern restaurant, the team is hard at work preparing hot meals.
It's a meal of gratitude, we call it.
Mohammed Faki is the founder and CEO of Canadian restaurant chain Paramount Fine Foods. In Toronto, he's known as much for his business sense as he is for his social activism and philanthropy.
When I get impacted by something and I feel it, I react by doing something.
Faki's focus right now, long-term care, a sector hit hard by the COVID-19 pandemic.
3,700 seniors died in our community, and it was hurting me. You know, I grew up in a community where treating our seniors says a lot about us.
Faki's story began a world away in Beirut, Lebanon.
I have been in a war. I've lived in bunkers, and I always came out with a smile because I believe there is a light that will come.
He came to Canada with little more than a dream to be successful. Faki succeeded and has dedicated himself to others, from providing hotels for those experiencing homelessness to hiring Syrian refugees.
Thank you. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Leave it here for them.
And now feeding frontline long-term care staff.
To date, 11,000 meals have been served, with multiple locations receiving every day. The goal is 30,000 meals, but that would depend on donations.
We don't get to see the appreciation, right, firsthand, so it's nice when someone comes and brings us all lunch.
For Kathy McLennan, this gesture of goodwill speaks volumes.
I mean, it may be a little thing, but it means so much to us.
Because the Food for the LTC Frontline campaign is less about lunch, more about showing appreciation and expressing gratitude.
And to everyone out there, giving back
feels good.
It feels amazing, and it does not. I'm not changing their life, but I'm sure we are making one day better for them.
Karen Lieberman, Global News, Toronto.
And that is Global National for this Saturday night. I'm Robin Gill. Tonight, your Canada is Alice sighting in Creston, BC. We'd love to see your corner of the country, so please keep sending your photos to viewers@globalnational.com. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you back here tomorrow. Have a great night.